everybody, I'm Angela Hart. Welcome to the Heart of New York show. This segment is about education, but it's going to be very exciting because I have an exciting guest with me, and we're talking about topics that are very current and different about things that are going on in the education system now. My guest is Joseph Lento. Joseph is a New York State licensed teacher of orchestral music and is also licensed with the New York State as a school district administration supervisor. He began his career in 1984, and some of Joseph's career highlights include being named the 2014 National Teacher of Arts and Humanities by the President. What an honor. Some of his career highlights include being named the 1998 Lehman High School Teacher of the Year, and in addition, Joseph has received commendations from President George H. Bush, President George W. Bush, United States Senators Charles Schumer and Kristen Gillibrand. In 2015, Joseph was a keynote speaker at the United Nations World of Assembly. He began his career with special needs students in 1985, and by '87, he co-founded the first ever performance group in the history of New York City public schools called Class Act. Class Act was a band that consisted solely of students with special needs from Hubert H. Lehman and the Evander Childs High Schools in the Bronx. In addition, in 1980, Joseph performed with the New York Philharmonic Orchestra on trumpet. Joseph, welcome.
Well, thank you very, very much. It's so nice to be here again, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity to share some information with the community and for the families out there that we hope they'll find very useful.
Yes, and tell the viewers the three topics we're going to be speaking about.
We're going to discuss today what's called an individual education plan, or more commonly known as an IEP. We're going to discuss the least restrictive environment, which is the classroom setting in which students with special needs are able to take those courses with the general population. And we're going to discuss restorative practices, which is a very new topic in our system today.
That sounds exciting. Tell us what restorative practices are. Anything that's restorative, I like to know about.
Well, you remember, I know when I was in school, I'd have to write on the board, Joseph will not fire spitballs at Sally 100 times. But today what we're doing is we're having the students not only write about their behavior, but to reflect on it. What caused it? Why did they do it? And that often involves not just them, but the person with whom they had the problem, the teachers, even their family, and the school community. So it's a very exciting endeavor that we're embarking upon, and we look forward to discussing that.
Tell us, what stage is this new method of restoration?
Well, restorative practices, I'd say the last year or so has really begun to take hold across the country, and different schools and different systems are using different techniques, writing techniques, speaking techniques, in terms of giving students understanding about what causes certain behaviors, so they have a dialogue that they can use, and then taking that and trying to incorporate that into their behaviors. And it's starting to show some really good success.
Have you had any personal experience with this yet, with your students?
You know, I've been doing restorative practices for a very long time, as lots of teachers have, in their own ways. I've always used music in addition to writing to accomplish that end. So it seems that, you know, I'm looking back and I'm saying, gee, this sounds familiar. And in fact, it is familiar to me. And we've just finished a big project on restorative practices that hopefully we can share with you at another time.
Oh, well, tell us, can they learn about this on LinkedIn?
Yes. Any of the topics that we're going to discuss and any of the services that I'm going to mention, if you contact me on LinkedIn, I'll be more than happy to provide you with the links and this information that you can use.
So tell me, when you say that you used music as a restorative tool, what do you mean by that? Tell the community.
Sure. I would use music, well, as we know, music it delves into the emotions and it elicits emotion from people. So I would use various styles of music and have students from that elicit certain images. And I would use specific music if I knew what type of, let's say, infraction the student took place in.
Give an example.
Sure. So students who seem to be very rambunctious, which is just one thing kids do, and I would need to try and have them redirect that energy. I would use something of a pastoral nature, maybe even Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, the Pastoral Symphony, as an example. Or I might use Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun by Debussy, in which various images of nature are elicited, and have them write about it. Even if they wanted to draw about it, they could do that as well.
Wow. And what age group are these students that you teach?
I've spent most of my career teaching high school students, but I've done this with grade levels from 3 through 12.
Wow. Whose idea was it? Who started this program about restorative behavior?
You know, it's like so many other things. You can't necessarily pinpoint where it started, but many of the major urban school districts have been using this, but there is no one place I could say, gee, it started in Philadelphia, or it started in Los Angeles, or in Bronx County.
Wow. Did you want to share more about that topic?
Well, again, restorative practices are taking place in your local schools, and that's something that one of the reasons for this program, I'm very grateful to share this information, is our parents often don't know what's happening in the schools. So if your child, if you've received a phone call that your child has, misbehaved, it's very possible, more than likely, that your child has been involved in some sort of restorative practice, a writing assignment, speaking with a counselor. And you should contact your school and say, hi, what's our restorative practice philosophy in the building? And it would really be very helpful. It's being done in all of our schools, and I suggest that you reach out and ask about the restorative practices in your school.
And you mentioned that sometimes it's between the student who actually caused the infringement and the victim. Is victim the right word? The recipient of that behavior.
Sure. The interaction, the
Yes.
players in the interaction. Kids often do silly things in school. It's just part of the process. But sometimes those silly things are hurtful, not only to the person who they're doing it to, but to themselves, because they build that as repetitive behaviors. And they'll use that in other situations. So we oftentimes now will get the kids together, and instead of saying, Joseph, just say you're sorry to Angela, it's a real discussion is there, where maybe some other kids are involved, and say, Joseph, you shouldn't have acted that way because you didn't realize it was hurting Angela's feelings. And so it's more of a community endeavor now, which is really good.
I bet it helps stop bullying or reduce it.
It does. Anytime you can engage a child in understanding their behavior and the impact it has, it's a wonderful thing. So we are seeing a decrease in bullying as well.
That's excellent.
Yeah. But there's a lot more on this topic, and we're just covering it briefly. And again, feel free to contact me on LinkedIn, and I can certainly share with you many more philosophies and resources for you to use.
That's Joseph Lento, Lento.
Yes.
Tell us more.
Well, one of the other things we wanted to discuss was the Individual Education Plan, or more commonly known as the IEP. Everyone has a stigma attached to special education, and should not be that way. Every student going through school might need some help in an area, and it doesn't mean that they're in a full-time special education program. You might have a speech impediment. You might have a situation where you need more time for testing. You are allowed to ask for an evaluation for your child, and what they'll come up with is, yes, Joseph needs more time, or extended testing time, they'll call it. So when the midterms come around, I'll get an extra 20 minutes to finish. And that's part of your individual education plan. I might need speech therapy. It doesn't mean that I don't have a great mind, or students that have any of these needs. What we do now is we address them. They should no longer be a stigma. Every parent should ask for an educational evaluation of their child. You know what your child is best at. You know about their attention span. You know the time limit in which they take to finish tasks. No harm in asking for an individual education plan and getting the resources that you need, whether it's occupational therapy or speech therapy, or you might need a device for, communicating. You might need to use a wheelchair or a walker or a crutch. These can be temporary or over long term. And so there should be no stigma attached to them. And you should definitely reach out to your school and get those services that your children deserve. It'll make their experience much better in school.
Now, are these services only available for children who need the IEP? Is that only for special needs or for all students?
All students are entitled to have an individual education plan. Now, I'm not suggesting that every student has to have one. You understand the way your child negotiates things. And if you know that they, for instance, need more time in doing their chores at the house, chances are they need more time in the classroom to do their test. I know many students who have 4.0 indexes, graduated from college, who had IEPs. They needed extended testing time. Maybe they needed a speech therapist. Maybe they needed some occupational therapy. These are all things that should not be a stigma, and you should definitely avail yourself of with your local school board.
What kind of occupational tools are available?
Well, now we have occupational therapists.
What does that mean?
That's a person who will go in and work on a student, with a student who might have gross motor skill deficiencies, maybe fine motor skill deficiencies. They might have trouble negotiating a pen or a pencil. And they give them activities in which they can strengthen their eye-hand coordination, their actual, it works not only academically but physically. They're physical specialists that help students overcome these things that are impediments to them learning. A student might not be taking copious notes because they can't negotiate the pen or pencil properly. But with the work of an occupational therapist, you can help that child be able to negotiate better between themselves and the paper.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's really wonderful things. There's so many resources in our schools today that a lot of families don't avail themselves of. Again, because there's a stigma attached. There should be no stigma attached once again. Reach out to your local school board. If you believe your child needs an individual education plan, sit down. They'll be more than willing to discuss it with you because we all want the kids to succeed. The more tools that they have to succeed, the better off the whole situation is going to be. And that's what we're there for.
So should a parent, if they notice that their child may be struggling in certain areas, should they contact the teacher, the school administrator, or the Department of Ed?
Of course, the first place to start is ask your child. Say, I noticed that this is going on. Are you having a problem in school with something similar? And of course, they'll tell you no. And that's where you want to speak to the teacher. And the teacher's always the best place to start. The teacher really, the work that our teachers do are just, it's amazing. I don't have enough, platitudes for the teachers. So always start with your child's teacher, and from there, they'll be the person that can then open up the resources for you in terms of who you should contact next. But first, always do start with the teacher.
Okay.
One of the other topics is the least restrictive environment. So if your child has been diagnosed with a special need, and maybe one that's not so subtle, but maybe one that's more overt, where they might need a wheelchair, they might need a walker, they might need a communication device. This is something where we provide where all students should receive an education in the least restrictive environment. So they can come into the same class as everyone else, and whether it's with any of those things I mentioned, they should be able to participate in the class, and the schools are really doing a great job. So if they know that your child needs to use a walker, the teacher will, negotiate the classroom so your child has a seat that's not, encumbering to them. So there's lots of things that are available, and we really strive hard to make an open, free environment for all the students. It's only where there are certain times where your child might need something so special where we might have actually a one-to-one aid for them. Your child might be entitled to a one-to-one aid. For instance, your child has a brilliant mind, but they have a problem with their hand, and they can't write. There'll be an aide to take the notes down.
Wow.
Many very successful people have had one-to-one aides. They've gone on to be, doctors and lawyers and teachers and all, manner of different professions. So that's also available as part of the IEP. A one-to-one aide might be part of your child's individual education plan.
Wow, and the city pays for this?
Yes. If your child goes to
Or the state pays for it?
it's a combination of state, it's actually federal funding. All of these things come under IDEA, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act.
Okay.
And there have been many variations of it since 1973. So it's basically federal funding, but the states then, of course, distribute it, and the cities distribute it. But it does start with federal funding. And if your child needs any of these things, your school will have the resources to find the funding for it. For people whose children go to private schools, you are also entitled to these services. All schools receive federal money, even if it's just in the form of textbook money. Any institution that receives federal funding, students in that school are entitled to services. So if you go to a religious school, or you go to some other private type of school, and your child needs special services, they are entitled to them. Doesn't matter that it does not have to be a public school. That's also something a lot of our parents do not know.
Right, right. They would think they're paying for the private school, so they probably think, well, they don't qualify for the other services, but they do.
They do, and the private schools must cooperate to the extent that's possible. If you contact me on LinkedIn, I can provide you with email contacts, websites, any resource you need to try and help your child. Of course, all free of charge.
Right. And it's not income-based, these services?
That's a great point, Angela. Outstanding
I'm asking,
point.
I don't know, is it true?
I should have said it. Income has nothing to do. These services, all children are entitled to them.
I love New York.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to live here. I don't know if all the states operate this
All
way.
the states are under federal mandate with the IDEA, but of course New York State is great, really great at implementing it.
Tell us more. What's going on in education?
Well, one of the biggest things that's always going on now is the charter school movement.
Yes. How do you feel about that?
Well, charter schools are definitely an alternative for people, and as much choice as possible is always a wonderful thing. There is, though, an imbalance in terms of students being able to get in to the charter schools. So we're trying to work on a system, not me, I say we, meaning the system, trying to make more available, and schools are now breaking up into smaller environments. They might have 4 different schools in one building where there used to be one.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a charter school within. So that's going on as well. Folks, there's so many resources for you and your children, and the biggest thing you can do is be your own best advocate. We want to hear from you. Without your voice, we don't know everything that's going on. And we need to know what you think is working and what's not working. And a lot of things that aren't working, it's not because the administrators or the teachers or the kids aren't trying. It's sometimes the bureaucracy that's out of our control. So if you want something, ask for it. Go to your school and say, look, we don't have this, can we get it? And you can start movements. The most powerful tool we have in our nation is education. Everything starts with education, because education of all public services is the closest extension to the home. A school is a reflection of the family, and we want to have great families, and we want all our schools to be great families, because our kids come from great families.
Wait, 1 second. Are schools a reflection of the family? Expound on that.
Sure. So when our students go to school, you never want a parent coming in, and because they're very upset, because they'll say, that's not what we teach you at home. And that's true. And so when we get the parents involved, the schools very much reflect what the families are doing.
Oh, okay. When the families are involved.
Yes, when the families get, and you can get involved. Our families are not involved because they don't want to be. Life is busy, and they trust us to do so much, and we're very, very grateful to have that trust. But we need your input, and we need our schools to reflect more of what you're doing at home, and we know you're doing a great job at home. And the more you have input, the more our schools look like your homes.
Okay.
And that's what we want. We want the input because we want the schools to look like our great families, and our families are great.
So tell the viewers who are not as familiar, what is the difference between a private school and a charter school, if there is one?
Yeah, charter schools are based on public funding. So the same funding that PS 72 would get, I'm making this very simple, of course. It's much more complex. But people who want to invest resources, meaning people who want to be responsible for the outcome of the school, they benefit in the profit of the school, but the funds come directly from the taxpayer. And that's where there's a conflict, and people are either unclear or sometimes upset about, and I can understand both sides, because the folks also in the charter schools, as of now, have not had to follow necessarily all the same rules.
Such as? About what?
Whether it's a discipline situation or sometimes even a special education service. And I'm not putting down the charter schools. They're doing a great job, and the people are very dedicated. They're working under the framework that they were given. They're not making up their own rules, by the way. This is the framework that they're working under. And we would just like to see more parity between the charter schools that are using public funding and the public schools that are, completely publicly funded as well. We want to see a more evenly distributed set of guidelines.
In terms of discipline and what else?
Again, services, discipline, students who they will take, who they won't take. We want to have that free and appropriate education for everyone. And while not all schools fit all kids, there certainly should be enough choices to fit all the different kids. And
So how would you classify if there's any limitations on the students getting into charter schools? What's the biggest wall for them?
Parent involvement. The more that, and I'll keep saying it again, the students who are in the charter schools, their parents are exponentially more involved.
Okay.
I'm not saying that they're better than the parents who aren't. They're just more informed. And that's why a program like this can help our families say, no, we can get that here too. And again, we want our schools to look like the great families our kids come from. The more parent involvement, the better the schools are going to be, because they're going to look like your home.
Wow. This is a new view. I haven't heard this before.
Well, I'm speaking for myself. I think I might be speaking for my colleagues. I hope I am. I've been doing this 34 years, and I've seen a lot of things. I've spent a lot of time in New York City. I've spent time in private schools. I've spent time on every grade level from pre-K through 12, special needs, general population, specialized schools, specialized programs, whether it be music, whether it be academics, whether it be as an administrator. So I'm just sharing with you the culmination of my experiences in this area. Mm-hmm. And there was another gentleman I'd like to mention, if I might. His name is Dr. Harold Reitman, and he's from an incredible group called differentbrains.org. And again, his group, and he speaks to people all over the country. He's also on LinkedIn, and he has wonderful resources for you, for your children, with this term neurodiversity. It simply means we all think differently.
I love it.
We think differently. When I was taught how to do long division in the 3rd grade, teacher came up to me and she said, "Joseph, what are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm doing my work." She said, "It's great, but how did you do it?" Until this day, I can't explain, and that's neurodiversity. I can do it. I just can't explain it traditionally. And that's really what we're moving toward as an educational movement. You know, recognizing everyone's differences, how can we get the most out of them, and not everybody needs to follow those exact rules to get the answer. I'm a professional trumpet player. How I play ultimately doesn't matter how I get the notes, but I've got them. And that's the essence of teaching. I teach like that myself.
Now, wait a minute. Did you say you're great at math?
No, I'm not. But
I was going to say, how could you be good at math and music? To me, they're diametrically
no, but
opposed.
I was okay at math, but whatever I learned, I couldn't explain back how I did it. And that's what we in education are moving toward. How does the child learn, and does it really matter if they didn't follow A, B, or C, but they got it? I'm in this school. It doesn't matter how you got it. You got it. And can you share it with someone else? And as an educator, for me, I'd like to think my greatest strength is finding out what my kids don't know and letting them figure it out with gentle help from me.
So we have about a minute left. How would you like to close with respect to some of these topics? What do you think is most important for the viewers to hear, or how would you like to sum up?
Well, again, we touched on the individual education plan, and from that, we will you'll be able to get your child all the services he or she needs, whether it's speech or occupational therapy or one-to-one aid or a communication device. Even restorative practices now are part of the IEP because you're entitled to a psychologist if you have an emotional problem. So it's all coming together really nicely.
Excellent. Thank you, Joseph, for coming on. I'm so blessed.
Thank you.
About once a year, I get to have, when Joseph's got, during the summer break, he's got time to come on the show, and it's usually in July we film. So this is being filmed in July 2018. We're so glad you're here. I hope you'll come on again. I hope I don't have to wait another whole year, but we'll see.
The pleasure is all mine, and thank you, Angela and Peter, and everyone here for these wonderful programs and giving us the opportunity to share some of this information. Thank you.
God bless. And we're on every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. in Staten Island on Channel 34, but you can watch us in the other boroughs on Channel 56 and 34. And you can also catch us on YouTube, The Heart of New York Show. Bye now. Thanks for watching.